Well, hello there, people. I'm so fucking happy right now. DJ Ware made the Debian testing versus OpenSuSe Tumbleweed versus Arch Linux stability challenge and security challenge that I basically embarked him on with my challenge video, and I have something on my class that's irritating me. And it came up for an hour ago. I just got the notification right now. So it's 33 minutes long. This video here, my reaction video to it, is going to be long. It's going to be a long-ass video. So let's get into it here.
Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be answering a question that Kent over at the Real Geek asked, which was, can you do a comparison between Debian testing, also OpenSuSe Tumbleweed, and Arch Linux to see which one is the more secure and which one is the more stable?
I'm going to pause a lot. I did say stable. I'm more interested in the security aspect of it. And as he said here, I read his intro here, is that stability is really hard to determine. And that's why in my video I was a little bit like, stability is not that important. But I like that he did it because he will go into it here in the video. I could see for the timestamp here, defining stability. It's a weird thing, depends on who you ask stuff. Like, I'm more interested in the security aspect. Why am I interested in the security aspect? I see comments saying that Debian testing is less secure than OpenSuSe Tumbleweed or Arch is more or less secure than some of the others. There's a lot of debates going on Reddit and other comment sections where some say, oh, they are secure, they are the same, or they are less secure. And that's what I am interested in, is to see what does the number say? You know, what does a test say that is recognized as being a somewhat accurate test to test security aspects? So that's what I'm interested in. How secure are they out of the box when you install it? When you start to install your own shit, different kind of programs, you fiddle around with config files and all of that stuff, you can either make it more secure or you can make it less secure. I just want to know, what do you start out with? What is the starting point? When you install Debian testing, what is the starting point that you get? When you take OpenSuSe Tumbleweed, what is the starting point? Arch Linux, what is the starting point?
So that's what we're going to attempt to address today. Let's stay tuned right after this. All right, so we're going to jump into this, and yes, we are going to test the all of these things. So yeah. So the first thing I always like to start out with is a quote. So if debugging is the process of removing bugs, then programming must be the process of putting them in. And that's
I kind of like that quote.
It's true. Funny, but it's true. The other one is, so if we're going to look at stability and we're going to look at security, we need to define those, because there are, especially with stability, there's some ambiguity in how those are defined, and there's overlap between different definitions depending upon what the heck it is you're talking about. So let's start with the first definition that I've seen for stability. So there are definitions which basically determine if software will run under stress. So you might call this stress testing, but really it's pushing conditions into the software that might vary its output. For example, you might increase its temperature, you might increase its voltage, that sort of thing. So, and you're trying to see not that the program works correctly, but to see if it'll crash. If I hit a certain point, does it just go down?
I think from most users' viewpoint, it's the crash aspect. They probably think of stability, you know, if you're just a normal everyday user like I am. I think most people will look at stability in this way as is, like, you know, how often do my program crashes? Is there a problem with updating procedures? Is there a problem with installing, uninstalling, you know, the user experience? And I think he gets into that, but I think most people that's what they're looking for.
If you're doing, if you're doing gaming on PCs and you're interested in reclocking your machine upwards, overclocking it, you probably go through some of this. You probably have to stand it up and run it for a while, and
Yeah, you run a benchmark, a CPU benchmark, a CPU benchmark to stress test the CPU to see if your computer crashes. So yeah.
And see if that game stays up with your new CPU frequencies and voltages to see if it's stable or not. So that would be sort of like that, and really that encompasses the second definition
Ooh, I like his new animations for the slideshows.
too. This one is you run for the software for an interval of time, not that you're varying anything, but you're just trying to see if it stays up for that interval of time, whatever that is, an
So that's basically a benchmark. He's benchmarking the software.
hour, overnight,
Or stress testing, sorry.
a couple of days, whatever it might be. There's some other things that come up here in testing. So you may find that you have memory leaks, you may have race conditions, you may have data that is bad, that's causing the application to crash. So yeah, all of that is designed to look for that kind of stability. Because, you should be handling air data, not blowing up the program, right? Yeah, as they say, never check for an air condition you can't handle. So the other one is, this is an interesting one. This is trying to attempt to define it in terms of hardware. Mean time between failures, mean time to failure, mean time to repair. You can't really use that to gauge software.
No.
There's still people that managers. They still are people that insist on doing this, but it's dumb because software doesn't fail the same way hardware does. It can be the worst.
I couldn't agree more here. I see some people that are hardware guys, and this is just from a hobbyist viewpoint. I see people that are really into hardware, and you think the software is working the same way, and I see people that really are into software. They think hardware functions the same way, and it's two different beasts. It's like night and day. One is a cat, and one is like a elephant, or a racehorse, or so. Like it's two different animals.
The worst case is it fails intermittently. And it's data driven usually.
We call those as when I was a mechanic, when you have intermittent failures, we call them Monday failures because they always happen on a Monday or Friday. So they're either a Monday error or a Friday error.
There's all kinds of if-then branches that are in code. So I've seen code run fine for a year, hit a branch for the first time and crash. And then people are like, wait, this has been running for a year. How come it crashed? So, yeah, and those ideas for mean time between failures, that probably came from hardware engineers that were trying to impose their standards on software engineers.
Oh, yeah. I believe that.
That ambiguity is still around as stability testing, so.
I love that fucking slideshow animation.
So how do you confuse a hardware engineer? Ask them to count to 10 without taking their shoes off. There's a coloration. They have one for us too. So yeah, and theirs is not quite as nice. So anyway, so what are we talking about here? What is Debian talking about when they define something as being stable? I've seen all kinds of people interpret this, and it seems to be that they read the Wikipedia, they see that there's ambiguities that have to do with the stability of the software. Actually, it has nothing to do with it. As far as Debian, and by the way, Red Hat too, as far as the stability, it's the stability of the interfaces in the system. So that includes both programming and user interfaces. And so you're trying to determine, are those interfaces changing over time? And you don't want to allow that in a stable release because that can cause program failures.
And this is why we have static releases. That's why they're doing it. That's why they're freezing software to make sure that all these things that you read ahead of some of the things here that is on the slideshow here. That's to prevent that. So when there are changes in the APIs and the user interfaces, the libraries and all of those kind of things, to make sure that they don't mess shit up.
So Red Hat has a way more concise definition, but they actually go through. By the way, they also subscribe to the stability model too, but they actually have a very formal process that they go through, and they actually have a PDF document that goes on for days.
Oh.
That actually goes through this definition. Debian also, they cover the same kinds of things. They talk about the stability of the application's program interface and the application's binary interface. So what the heck is all that? So those are APIs are interactions between software and software. ABIs are interactions between software and hardware. There is all kinds of ABIs. Intel has standards, ISBI or something like that they call it. But they're all standards that you have to adhere to in order to communicate to the hardware. So anyway, let's talk about the application program interface first. So what is that? So APIs are determined at compile time. That is, I have to get agreement with whatever application I'm talking to that there is either a published applications program interface that says, this is how you send me data, and this is how I send you the result back. So, for example, let's say I write a calculator and I'm trying to call it, and I want to pass it. I want you to add, and then I'm going to give you two numbers that I want you to add together, and I want you to give me the result back. So I could change it to a multiply, a divide, a subtract, but that API defines what that other application is going to do. If that changes, then one of the applications is probably going to get confused and not know what to do with it.
So look at an API as a set of standards, instructions. This is how you do this, and the program call for set standards or set instructions to basically help it do what it needs to do. So if the instructions or standards changes and the program don't know they have changed, the program don't know what to do with them. That's how I look at it anyway. I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit here.
Especially if I'm shuffling, variables around and they're not in the same positions as they were when we originally reached an agreement. I've seen that a lot. So Debian says just about the same thing, and so that's what they're talking about too, is preserving to make sure that application program interface doesn't change between when you're in a release like 11 or 10, that API and ABI isn't going to be modified on you. There's the other part of it is so how far does that go? All right. So Debian says that if I build an application on, say, 11.3, which is the most current as the time I'm doing this video, will that code run on Debian 11.0, the original release that came out, a year and a half ago or so? And the answer is yes, because those application interfaces don't change when it goes up from 11.0 to 11.1, 2, and 3. They stay the same. There's no modification there, and Debian and Red Hat guarantee it. So, but does that mean that my code, I can push it down into Debian 10? Not necessarily.
And that's again because, like I talked about before, the state of the program that is being frozen to run Debian 10 or any other static release is not the same state the program is in when they're being frozen for Debian 11 or a newer version of said program. And that's where all those libraries and underlying infrastructure, they change. It could be as simple as, okay, we have a config file in this folder, now we have it in another folder. Or this line is 10 lines down in a config file where it's not in another, in a previous config file. It can be that simple. And that's why, again, static releases or frozen releases tend to be more stable because they have time to test for this.
Because there is no guarantee there because you're switching repositories. So yeah, Debian 10 repositories are different than Debian 11. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and so you cannot guarantee that the ABIs and APIs have not changed. Stability. So this gets really easy for Debian testing. Debian testing is a future Debian stable. Mm-hmm. So all it is it's a collection of packages that are going in and being assembled to go into a future release of Debian. In the case right now, at the time, again, that I'm doing this video, it's Bookworm, which is the code name for Debian 12.
I love that name. So
can you assume that if I mix 11 with the testing releases that it will work, that the APIs and ABIs will work? No, you can't. Exactly. So by definition, Debian testing is not stable for Debian 11. It's also not stable for Debian 12 because testing allows new packages to be inserted. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and that's the other problem that you have with Debian testing. So is that a rolling release? No, it just means it's active. If you want to see a full rundown on all the repositories, You'll find this diagram that's out in the Debian wiki.
By the way that Debian testing functions is kind of the same way as Fedora function. Some of us nerds have adopted the term semi-rolling release because it's not fully rolling, but a lot of the software is being updated in a rolling fashion until a new release comes out. Meaning that you get the newest kernel, you get the newest libraries. They are changing, the APIs and the ABIs, but there's some testing going into it and all of that fucking shit, which can be really confusing.
And you can go through it, but basically from the top down, you have red boxes, which is development, yellow, which is your testing phase, and green, which is your production. So all of the repos that have to do with production are in green, like security, stable updates, stable, backports, and so forth. The red ones are in unstable. That's actually one they call SID. So SID is if there's anybody that wants to submit a package or they've got something that's brand new, they just throw it in SID. Yeah. And that's where it sits until somebody can grab it and then pull it over to testing and start working on it. If they think that that's one that they want to include in a future release of Debian.
I will put that up on the screen. It has to have been in SID for 2 to 10 days without problems or something like that before it comes into testing. And I think it also has to be able to upgrade from one version over to another one without breaking the system before it goes into testing. I will show the definition because if you Google Debian testing, it gives you 3 or 4 requirements a package has to go through before it gets pushed into testing. That's what is being done in SID also. But yeah, SID is basically the dumping ground. It's where everything is being, it's a cooking pot.
Usually it is. Also, any security updates that come through the system come through that way. But security updates are kind of special. So we also want to get them out to production just as soon as possible, right? So we don't want to wait for it to go through a testing phase. We want if this is a critical thing, we want to be able to get it out there right now. So it will go to security. Security goes to proposed updates, and proposed goes into stable updates, and that gets pushed into the stable release over time. So security updates flow straight in. I've heard so many people say, "Oh well, Debian doesn't ever get the security updates." No, it does. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard people say, "Oh, it takes days, it takes weeks, it takes time to get it through." No, if it's a critical, it will go through immediately. If it is a non-critical patch, it might go through testing.
Yeah, and that's the nuance that a lot of people they tend to forget. Is that it depends on the situation. It's same with software for some distribution. If it's a highly used software, they may push it in before it's tested as thoroughly as a kernel, for example. They may test a kernel way more than they test, let's say, VLC or something like that.
In order to do some more formal testing on it to make sure we're not inserting a bug into our production environment, which would be a disaster, right? We don't want that. So
then you have to go to a manager and be like, I think I fucked something up here. I don't know what I fucked up, but I fucked something up. And then it's like, yeah, you don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, and then you have experimental. So what is experimental for? Up in the red box next to unstable. If it's found that this particular package is having issues, it's breaking, it's not running right, given the wrong data, I don't know, half a different things that it could be. It doesn't get put in unstable. Unstable doesn't mean that this is a collection of broken packages. No, the broken packages get stuck in experimental.
Yeah, and that's why Debian, their naming schemes for their unstable, experimental, testing repos, and stable repos confuses a lot of people. So look at it like this. Unstable and experimenting, you're just washing the car before you have to sell the car. You wash the car. Boop. And testing, this is where you polish the car, wax the car, maybe you touched up some paint knocks and stuff like that, so it's like perfect. And stable, it's now out on the floor and ready to be sold. That's maybe an oversimplification, but it's a good way of remembering how the different repos are in Debian. And again, that's different from distribution to distribution.
Or they're sort of, we'll work on these when we get time. They're not critical to what we're trying to do, but we'll just throw them in there and we'll work on them as we get time and fix them. And and the maintainer can then decide what they want to do with them. There's a number of things they might decide to do with it. Nothing could be an option.
Yeah.
They might pull it back and then get it fixed, and then it'll flow through the unstable side, or it may get inserted into backports. Backports that's how you get changes to packages into a production release, rather than sending new packages into the stable version, because again, you could disrupt an API or an ABI. They go through backports, and backports makes whatever change that new package had in it so that it can be applied to the old version of the code. So you still get the new feature, but it still carries the old version over, right? Does that make sense?
I think the best way of thinking about it is the kernel. You could run a 5.14 kernel, for example, but you can still have the latest firmware drivers in there because you can backport them in, but you may not have some of the features that the 5.18 kernel have, like memory management features and stuff like that. That's kind of what Debian also is doing with backporting. So let's say you're running LibreOffice 1 in Debian stable, and you really, really need some features in LibreOffice 2. Then you can backport via the backport repositories you can enable on Debian stable. You can now install LibreOffice 2 from the backporting repository, and software in the backport repository in Debian stable for Debian stable, again via their documentation, say that it has been tested to work with the stable release. So they do some testing, more testing, to make sure it don't break the API and APIs.
Provided it doesn't alter the API or ABI. So yeah, we don't want that. So one of the ones I left off here. So just to summarize, unstable is SID. Experimental is where packages go that have issues and problems. Stable is the production release. Testing is the next stable release of Debian. One of the things you'll find out with testing, if you're running on testing for any length of time, as they get closer to a release, so as a new release is coming up, they will freeze that repository.
And that's what I talked about in another video. And in my experience, it varies how long they freeze it, but let's say it comes out in August, July, August. They tend to, like around January, February, they start to slowly freeze like the kernel and the desktop environments and stuff like that. And they basically start to really, really test it. But that's just, again, it can vary really much. But that's just from my experience, is that maybe half a year, 8 months, they start to slowly freeze some really, really important packages to really hammer in the testing.
The Debian devs will freeze it and allow no more changes to the testing so that they can finalize everything, get it packaged up and ready to go to become, in this case, Debian 12. So yeah, and you'll find that happens where there'll just be this, I don't know, a week or two maybe sometimes. Depends.
Oh, it's like I said, when they did it up to Debian 10, I actually ran Debian 9 testing. And I think Debian 10 came out around summer. I noticed that already Christmas the year before, like November, Christmas the year before, they started to freeze packages. The kernel stopped getting updated around February, March.
On what they find, but yeah, I mean, that could happen. So there's other repos, but those aren't really going to be part of our discussion today. There's a rule that Debian has. Again, I've heard people, there's all kinds of advice on the internet. If you listen for a while, you get all kinds of great advice, most of it wrong. Yeah. So here's the thing. Never, ever mix packages between stable, unstable, or testing.
That's why they have backports.
That is not my rule. That comes from Debian. And so, yeah, if you want newer software, get it from backports.
Yeah.
But don't don't mix your repos on the same system. Don't do that. If you're going to do testing, go to testing. So and take the backports, and
it's actually a really good general rule to have. Don't mix repositories. Don't mix testing repositories with a current release repository. Don't mix unstable repositories with a current repository. This kind of goes for anything and everything with software.
Take the security updates out. You will still get security updates, because remember, there was a line that came down from the security, went into testing. You'll still get them. But it may take a little while for you to get it. So yeah, it just depends on how soon that they want to push it out to you. So failure to heed this rule means you'll end up with an unstable system. And I'm not talking about an API. I'm talking about application crashes at random. Yeah, not of the SID kind, but
I've read about people doing that shit where they test mixed repositories and they couldn't boot their computer. It was just broken. Like, the computer worked, but the operating system was just there.
The kind that will cause production issues for you. What about security?
Yeah.
What do we mean by a more secure system? Or is it is it even considered secure? That's a tough question to answer. And I have asked many security engineers over the years about, hey, can you tell me what it means to be secure? And they'll just kind of look at you for a minute and they'll start stammering. It's like it's like that for a minute, and then their eyes will go to the floor. Their feet will start shuffling like they would really like to just walk away from you, and their hands will start waving, and then they'll.
I've done the same. I ask a lot of fucking people about security, and that's because, and I don't know if he's going into this here, but secure definition. So he probably is going into it here. So I will kind of guess what he's going to say right now. It depends on what you want to be secure. If you care about, let's say, people being able to see your location, then there's security measures for that. If you don't want your data to leak, security measures for that. You need to know what you want to be secure against. Theft of identity, people being able to hack your system, breach your system, people not being able to get access to your network. All of these things is attack vectors, they call it sometimes, or security vectors, or whatever the fuck you call it. You kind of have to you have to make an essay and say, okay, what is the most important thing for me that I don't want to happen to me? And then you have to make security measures for those specific things. And the way that you secure against, let's say, your location not being leaked is not the same way that you secure your system against your data being leaked. So you get what I'm trying to say here, and I think that's what he's going to say here next time, is that you have to define what you want or mean by security for you. Because I may not care about that you know my location, but I may care about my data. And you'll be like, okay, I don't care that, you know, they can sniff some packages from my network, but I really don't want to know where I live. Two different security. They're both security problems, but they're two different problems, and you mitigate those or answer those or fix those in two different ways. What I meant when I meant security is I just want to see what the Lynis score was. That's all I wanted, because it's kind of Linux YouTubers use the Lynis test tool almost as a benchmark testing tool. You know, you do Unreal Engine or Unity, whatever the fuck it's called, to benchmark your GPU and you know, what is it called? The one with the furnitures, the 3D Mark, or why can't I remember it right now? You know, you do a CPU benchmark to see what the score is. Linux people use Lynis. That's what I meant with security. What is Lynis saying? Because that's what most people know about security, is that does it have a high Lynis score? Does it have a low Lynis score? What he's doing here is he's going in with it as a mindset as an engineer, which is really, really fine because it gives us a lot of information.
I'll say something like, well, it's impossible. That's usually what they'll blurt out. You can't. So what do you do instead? Well, you can ask some questions and you can set up some policies. So there's some that are already defined for you and you can follow those. Like, here's some examples. This isn't all of them, by the way. Do you have user accounts that are using default passwords that came with your repo? Or no password? See that. Are you using shared passwords? Or two or more users have the same password. Is there strong authentication that's being defined, and is that centralized someplace, like an LDAP or maybe Active Directory? Are you using that? The other ones are, do you need to restrict access to the system depending upon what the privileges are for that user? If you do, then how do you restrict it? How are you doing it? And is it sufficient to prevent users you don't want in access to it? And is it sufficient to allow users that you do want to give access to be able to get in and get the data? So can you continue? The other one, this is an interesting one. This came up a long time ago. I haven't heard this question asked too much anymore, but can you continue to operate even if you're under attack?
Oh.
So a DDoS attack. Will your system, do you have a mechanism?
That's actually, streamers do that a lot. They pay for services that allow them to basically stream while they're getting DDoSed. Streamers are using a lot of like Cloudflare websites. Do that a lot. Again, Cloudflare and stuff. I think it's called Cloudflare, and services like that. Some YouTubers do it, so they can upload if they're getting DDoSed. It's really a big, or not a big, but it's highly. How the fuck can I explain this? It's a problem that a lot of content creators have, and they want to mitigate and they want to solve. So I have heard it before within content creation in the form of DDoS attack. When we are talking malware and antiviruses and ransomware, I actually never heard about how can I continue operate if I get a malware. It makes sense from a server, maybe a little bit for desktop, but yeah.
In place to allow continuous operations in the event that happens. Are your systems physically secure? I mean, can you walk into the building and just walk into the computer room and do what you want?
That's what a lot of people they tend to forget. I hate when I go to a coffee shop or something like that, and I see people just with their phone just laying flat on the table and they're going over for a muffin, or they have their laptop open and they go over for a pee or something like that. When I look and I see it's a Linux machine and stuff like that, it's like, you're probably a security fucking Karen in the comment sections, and you go take a whiz while your computer is open because you have a password on it. They can still fucking nick your computer, man.
Or like I remember a couple times where in our facility, I saw visitors had visitor badges, and I didn't see an employee badge with them. That our policy was that visitors were not allowed to walk the floor unescorted. So I would grab them and I would escort them back up to the lobby.
Out of my room.
If I saw them. And yeah, in this case, it was kind of funny. They were actually testing to see if somebody would actually step up and say something to them. So you got to watch out. They do test once in a while. Backups. Do you have backups that are current? Do you know where they are? Do you know how to get to them? How are they applied?
How many do you have? Is it on-site, off-site, online, offline? Yeah, just having a backup flash drive is not that secure if your building burns down. And
then your security patches, are they current on your systems?
Let me try again. That's why I get really frustrated when people are like, yeah, you can run Windows software under Linux, and it tends to be really outdated versions of specific Windows software. But that also means that they are not past the security updated. Means that they now can get access to your Linux system through your Wine emulator. That's not an emulator, by the way. If a Windows program can get a virus and you run it under Linux via an emulator or Wine or whatever you run it on, your system can be infected. And some of those, they can use that as a backdoor into your Linux system. Crazy to think about, right?
And again, how are that done? Do you employ pen testers, and how often? Do you do regulatory compliance testing? So, because if you leave a system sitting long enough, you'll have system engineers, you'll have software developers, you'll have system admins that will go in and make changes, and they're human, they'll forget to put it back.
Or they have the password under the keyboard on a notepad.
They're done because they got it to work, and they're so happy that they just want to get the heck out of there today and go home. So, yeah, so that happens. So are you checking for that? Are you checking for compliance to make sure the systems are still in the same locked out conditions that you want it to be? Also, there's 900 other questions like that. So this is just the start. You're not done. So when you are done, you end up with you have a risk assessment. You don't have a security. You can't check the box that says, hey, boss, this system is 100% secured. All you can do is say...
Oh, you can. I know how to 100% secure a system. Unplug it from the internet, burn it to the ground, so nobody can use it. But then it's unusable, but it's secure. Nobody can use it. But you lost all your data, but nobody can use it.
Based on the amount of money you're willing to spend, boss, this is where we're at as a percentage. Where a system that met all the compliance standards would be. And here's where you're at. And if you want to get here, this is the cost it's going to be. And then that's really up to them. It's a business decision at that point whether or not they want to spend the money to continue to make the system more hardened. So, did I sufficiently lower your expectations? I hope so. But those are just some simple things you can do to get started. So the way I'm going to do the assessment today is I'm going to run Lynis.
Like I said, that's kind of like the security benchmark that Linux YouTubers love to use. And yeah, again, does it mean that it's like secure? No, it's a number that gives you an outcome, or it's a test that gives you a number, and we can compare that number. And how I look at, like I said before, it's this is how I see it: is that how secure is it, again in quotes, to start with? How much more work do you need to put into to make it, give it a generalized security number? And that is what Lynis is. I see it as a generalized security number or test.
Lynis is a tool. If you've seen my videos on distribution reviews, you've noticed I've run it every time I've done it. 70 or below, 70 is considered passing, and this is rule of thumb. So you might find some people that say, well, it's okay if you have 65, and maybe it is, but most of the rule of thumbs that I have seen, 70 or below is failing. I mean, below 70 is failing. 70 and up is passing. So
okay, I didn't know that. Like I said, I'm not that familiar with Lynis. My phone just vibrated, and I thought I forgot to take my butt plug out.
So that's what we'll be comparing against. So we're going to do Debian testing, and this will be version 11, which means that the testing release will be 12. I know that was confusing, but it will be actually 12. OpenSuSe Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release. And then finally, Arch Linux, which is Easy Linux. And
is it Easy Linux or Easy Archer? I think he meant Easy Archer. If it's Easy Archer, Esnek, he is going to have the biggest fucking ego boner in the world. Every time someone mentions his distribution, I can hear him like getting 10 years younger, flexing his muscles in front of the mirror and be, yeah, baby, they are using my distro.
By the way, rolling releases, by their very definition, allow new packages to be installed on your system. They also allow new kernels, unless you're running an LTS. They also allow new kernels to be installed. And that is the case, and you have no way of controlling that internally. In other words, I'm not collecting the repo and I am sorting through it to find new packages that are coming inbound. Arch and Tumbleweed can never be stable as defined by Red Hat and Debian.
Exactly.
Because they do not protect the APIs and ABIs. There's no way you can protect that if you have new packages rolling into the system. So let's stop here, and I'm going to go set up my system, and let's see where we're at. I have Debian up here, and you can see that it is bookworm /SID. And that would be 12, of course, and you can see that is definitely a newer kernel than what you'll find on Debian 11. Debian 11 is 5.10, excuse me. And then we'll go over here. And it's interesting that all these are about the same versions. This is 18.0, this is 18.2. And then down here on Arch is this one. And I wanted to stop before I forget. Esnix, who has a YouTube channel, and I'll put his link in my description as well. He has done an amazing job of setting up an installer for Arch. I think it's based.
His ego boner, man. It's like it's over level 9,000 right now. He's like, yeah, he's he's liking this. I love messing with him, by the way.
On Calamares, and I was blown away by how easy and how simple it was.
It is a great distribution.
Esnix, great job. Great job. I enjoyed using that. It was amazing. So I am in the directories here, and I want to run this, which is the Lynis audit. And then I want to do the same thing over here. That may fail.
I'm like a fucking kid in a candy store. I don't know why I'm so excited to see what this is saying.
I think my finger slipped off the keyboard, which it does a lot on this one.
Oh, I love those
So
CLI
right now I'm
wallpapers.
gathering an assessment of the system. Debian is done. I'm waiting on the other two now. This one takes a while to get through all the ports and packages, but eventually we'll get there. I'm just going to scroll up here without looking at the score just yet. I want to see what the warnings are. No warnings here. I have two, actually. I have two warnings. Let's see what we got here.
One?
Just one.
What is Art saying? One?
Just one. Okay, so this one I caused. I caused that one. And I don't have this set up. I'm running minimal and on Debian, so I don't have this set up. So my fault. Normally that would not be an issue, but this one would be because you're supposed to remove the security repositories to run testing. So, which is what I did.
So user error maybe, or yeah, I don't know.
Now that's not me. That's what Debian says. All right, so we have. Let's just see how we do here. So these are missing firewalls, both of these. That's fairly common. And then we have expiration dates for our passwords. We have USB modules and FireWire modules that are installed. We need to have a DNS configuration for the domain name, which I don't have, of course. These need to be either whitelisted or thrown out or denied. And then I have a number of problems with my configuration with SSH. A banner, some deleted files are present, and restricting file permissions. Let's take a look at this one. One thing I noticed that wasn't in here, though, is this is not looking for a home directory on a separate partition or a var or a temp.
Okay.
But if I come through here, I just noticed it. I just started to see it, that this one is complaining about that. Let's see if this one is too.
That's because Tumbleweed is run by a lizard. You know, a lizard don't need that shit. They are just hardened animals, man.
This is also complaining about that as well. Lynis really prefers to have home, temp, and var on its own partition. And that's just to protect your root partition from filling up because your logs are full or something. So, or you have a user that's decided to write a program that, how many bytes can I write before I fill up the file system? I've seen that kind of malicious behavior before.
I'm not saying I've done something like that in school with a mate of mine. Never dream about doing something like that to see if we could crash a computer.
Process accounting issue. Those are all standard things. So we have a 65. This is Arch again.
Ooh. So 70 and up was passing. 65 and down was not passing. Interesting.
Tumbleweed. Let's see what we get for it.
What do we get with Tumbleweed?
69.
So a little bit better than Arch. But again, that didn't check for the different repository or different partitions. So if it did, it probably also have gotten 65. I guess. I don't know.
And I suspect this one will be low.
61.
Because I would guess, I would have to go in and look, but I'm guessing that security issue, not having the security repos present, Lynis probably weights that a little higher. So, before I usually got about 64 to 66 on Debian stable, and you can see it's dropped quite a bit. So, all of these, by the way, are failing in my rule of thumb. So it's just a matter of degrees. This is slightly failing. This is slightly more failing, and this is really failing. So I guess if you want to have a battle about security between the systems as to which one has failed the least. I guess you could do that. This one got most of its points because it already has, and we can check that. I know they use ButterFS, and so these are
that's why.
volumes where these partitions are mounted. So temp is on its own, tempfs. Home is on a ButterFS partition by itself. Var, same thing. So yeah, this one already is, it's set up. Now these won't be, because most of the defaults install everything under root, which that bugs Lynis a lot.
So if I'm speculating here, but if you did like a separate temp and var and home, you would probably get up to close to the 65, 66, 8, 69 ish, I guess. So they'll be much closer to each other. So it's actually just a matter of, how you set up your partitions more than, how many backports do you have open, how is the SSH security and stuff like that. Which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, same one here. Now, to be truthful, this number was, when I ran it raw against Arch, and I don't know if this is an Esnix script or if it's a part of the Arch install, but there were a number of users, like root, for example, which had the ability to log into the system and no password was set. There was also a couple of them that needed to have groups associated. There was some groups like group check, grpck, goes out and checks to see if you have all the security groups set up, like wheel and video and audio and blah, blah, blah. So I had to get through that. And then Lynis discovered this was running on Arch, and so it wanted the Arch audit tool, which is the thing that tells you about what CVEs are out and are available. I think we can, let me see if I can find it. I think it's called Arch Audit. Yeah, Arch-Audit. And you can see that. There's tools like this for Debian, and I think there's tools for SUSE as well. But
I have to say, after using SUSE for 20 years, I actually don't know if there is. I know there is an audit tool in YAST, in the graphical user interface, and in the CLI user interface of YAST, but what it uses and how it works and how accurate it is, not that versed in it.
It'll tell you that, okay, so your grub is affected by multiple issues, and you can get info in this, and it'll actually give you the CVE. I've always been impressed with this. I think it's really cool that they add this in here. So I could put in recursive, so it'll go down through all of the dependent packages as well. And then, let's see. And there's the CVEs that are associated with a particular risk. So medium risk is fix as soon as you can, but it's not. It's probably means that the vulnerability is requiring access to the machine, physical access. Low is, fix it whenever you can, but it's not a big deal. These, however, are bad. High risks are fixed now. And that's why that pathway is in the development chain for Debian. So, and that is to fix those things. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all. Let's go back and talk about kind of where we are here. And so, conclusions. How did we do? Well, they all failed. So, as far as stability is concerned, none of them can be considered stable, not according to the definition of Debian and Red Hat. That's my opinion.
I will agree with that opinion about being stable. I like that. I will agree with that. But again, that's not like, I'll get that at the end of the video.
As far as the security, well, they all fail. So none of them are secure or equally insecure.
Yeah.
Or close to it anyway. So there are risks and costs to a program of action. This was a quote by JFK. And he said, but there are far less than the long-range costs of comfortable inaction. So doing nothing could end up costing you more in the long term. And that is something that seems like we have to relearn about every other year with security and securing the systems. So is Lynis the be-all, end-all tool for securing your system?
Nope.
No, of course not. There are so many different things that in order to harden a system, bring it into compliance, make sure that it is as taut or as secure as it can be, given a given budget. Yeah, if you have an unlimited budget, which I would really find unlikely, yeah, you could probably secure it to the nines, but no business is gonna spend that kind of money. It's too big an effort. So you want to make sure that you're covering the ones that are important to you, because
exactly
the one thing that it takes a long time for a business to build up a reputation as somebody that's trusted, and only a few seconds, just one of those breaches can completely destroy their credibility.
Yep.
And it will take them years and years to regain what they lost. So with that's all I'm going to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed this. And Kent, I hope this answered your question.
Oh, more than answer it.
About the security in here. And with that, I'm going to go off and do something else. Hope to see you all again soon. Please like and subscribe. And bye for now.
Yeah, remember to do that. So, I really like this. It's amazing. There's a lot of great info there, and it kind of, like what I said in my video is that I said my prediction was, if you look at my challenge video, the DTWare mission, is that I guessed that they're kind of the same. And I would say that Arch and Tumbleweed would be kind of the same. I was a little bit disappointed with Debian testing. I will say this. How you should look at this is, what is your starting point? That's how you should look at this. Don't look at it as, oh, I can't use Debian testing because it only got a 61. No, it just means that you have to do a little bit more work to get that overall score up than you have to do under Tumbleweed or Arch. That's all it means. And if you're willing to do that, you can run it. In the end, there's only one person responsible for your security. That's you. And with the stability aspect of it, like I said, again, in that video, the DTWare mission video, I don't really care that much about it because, again, it's a vague term. Stability the same as security. But it depends on what you mean by security the same. Stability the same with security. What he did here, the approach that he took, and I think he would get some flack for it, or some will not understand it. He took the engineer, the software engineer, the system admin engineer viewpoint. So he was like, okay, a customer or a boss wanted me to know which of these systems was most stable in a work environment. So he looks at he did the test as he would have been doing them, or looked at the problem as he would have been doing it, as if I was a customer or I was his manager that want him to secure a system. How they look at things and how we look at things are totally different. Like I said, we see stability as, can I update, can I install, uninstall, and how often shit crash on me. That's what we think about stability. Security, you end users, us normal nerds that know nothing about computers, we probably are more like our security meaning of security is probably just how often do I get infected? Can people get onto my computer? And do I lose my identity? Do they know where I am, who I am? Can they get my passwords, my email address, and stuff like that? That's what we see as security as an end user. It's really interesting to see how an engineer or system administrator would answer a question versus how an end user will answer a question, meaning me. And that also shows you that depending on who you are and what your use case are, you have to approach a problem differently. We kind of have to be better at defining what we mean by the words. I think that's what I'm taking away from this video. That one, they are kind of the same. I was a little bit disappointed in Debian testing. And we need to be better at defining when we are asking questions like stability and security. This has already been a really, really long video, and I will edit this and it will come up as the first video after I recorded this. Take care and use whatever distribution you want. This is just a little bit of fun.